The best helpers proved to be working men who could tell in the homely language of the workshop of what Christ had done for them.
I had been a choir boy since the age of 8. My father, a keen churchman and chorister, had encouraged his 2 older sons and myself to join a choir. And I enjoyed church music. And now, at 19 years of age, I realised what a marvellous religious education I had had through this music. And I knew I could talk about these things. So I applied to the Church Army headquarters in London and dealt with the paperwork, as my brother did. And we entered the college near Marble Arch in London in January 1936.
So I was at the service when the captain who was in charge of the van came and spoke. It was Remembrance Sunday, and he was speaking of sacrifice. And I suppose for the first time I realised something of what the Lord Jesus had done for me, and I just as it were let go all the past, all that was all my sin, and the most wonderful sense of peace filled me. Cycling home, I stopped halfway in a quiet place, and I began to pray, Lord, I would love to share this wonderful peace with other people.
I went to the library we had at the headquarters where I was working in the RAF and borrowed a book produced by the Ministry of Labour on church and social work. And I read all the different things, how I could become a clergyman, and that didn't ring many bells, a bit too respectable, I think. And generally I went through a selection of things like this, and I came across Church Army. And it said it's sought to be as a Church of England organisation for lay people seeking to be, where they were seeking to be, a spearhead in evangelism, seeking to go where the church was not. I thought, wonderful, missionary work at home. And then I read about the kinds of work we were doing, or they were doing, a whole range of work. And I thought, well, maybe somewhere amongst all that, God could even use Smithy. I didn't know, but I thought, what can I do?
What attracted me to the Church Army was the fact that it just seemed the right thing for me. There was a variety of work, and everything fell into place. There'd always been obstacles. When I tried other societies, there'd always been obstacles, but everything fell into place with Church Army. And as soon as I went up to selection conference, I just had the feeling that this was the right way forward for me.
I was a letter from the Bishop of Tanganyika's wife. She said she had been given my name by Church Army because the bishop wants someone to go and help with the girls' work. Well, to start the girls' work with another Church Army sister, and with Captain Shaw and Captain Bennett. So I said, well, I thought God was calling me to India, but if it's Africa, I go to Africa. That's where the Lord wants me.
But of course in 1939, the country was at war with Germany. And most of that mission work with the men closed down, and we were allocated to different work. War work and a lot of it. The Church Army did considerable work amongst the troops.
Well, it goes back to wartime, when I was sent to Birmingham, during the day helping to build Spitfires, at night in Dad's army. But I went to the local mission church where there was a Church Army sister, Sister Merrill. And, you know, I discovered that she and quite a lot of people in the area in the Church Army, I got to know them. I was even invited to what they would call area devotionals, you know, and got a sense of the family. And the sister told me when I left Birmingham to come home, she said, I've had a word with God and I've told him, you've got to be in the Church Army. But the first thing I did, I had a fascinating job as a stipendiary reader in charge of a little church in Yorkshire outside Huddersfield for 3 years. Delightful, I enjoyed it, but it was in the country, lots of farms, and in a sense I wanted something a bit, if you're tougher, you know. And I still remembered what I'd seen of the Church Army. And still back in my mind, the sister who said, one day you'll be in the Church Army. So I wrote to Church Army, said, can I come? And to my surprise, they said yes. And I joined Church Army on my birthday in 1946.
I was asked to go to, the war just started, to go to do war work. And we worked with Catholics, with Methodists, Salvation Army, all the different groups worked under kind of one umbrella. And I went to a lovely place called Quisisana in Algiers, where I always called it our hula hula hut. And in that hula hula hut, the men used to come back from fighting on the Rimini coast, and they used to have this quiet and talk, being able to share with us. And I think, to me, that was a wonderful time of letting them be quiet and to open up. And they had to go back to their warfare. You
met people in those days, so many who'd been in the forces, and come back and said, well, we've got to have a new England, you know, a new country, and we've got to share the faith. So you met people from every walk of life, which in itself was fascinating. It all rubbed off on one another. And also through that, people from different Church Army walks of life would come and talk to us and give you an insight into all that the Church Army was about. And in the process, you were learning something about the founder and his vision.
I used to love the annual meetings when we used to march with the banners from Bryanston Street. All through London. All through London. The police would hold up the traffic. We'd go with our banners. But we weren't very orderly, were we? Yeah. All in our bonnets and cloaks or bonnets. But from Marble Arch to St Paul's Cathedral, we all walked. We marched. Yeah. But I was used to walking. In the trekking, I did about 300 miles some summers.
Well, I was reading the Palm Sunday story and using my Bible to find the answer to the questions that Church Army was asking. And it came to me, the Lord had need of the donkey, the Lord had need of me. And that's the beginnings.
Being part of the Church Army family has been a very real fellowship that I suppose being in residential training together, we formed a bond, particularly the sisters with the other sisters, and that has continued all through my 57 years of commissioned service, that those of us who still were trained together remain in touch. And you always felt that you had a backup, that even though you were isolated in one particular parish or area, there was always a backup through headquarters or through other Church Army people.
There is a bond between officers which is extremely important, and I think it comes, to me it came through my acceptance for training. It built up during the training period until you were finally commissioned and out in the work. and you knew that other fellow officers, captains or sisters, had gone through that process and had faced the same challenge of commitment to our blessed Lord and to the Church Army.
Belonging to the Church Army family, I felt was a great privilege. The picture I think I remember most in concerning with that is one of the earlier days when we had our annual conference in London, and the Church Army in Upper Berkeley Street was still standing. It was during the war, but that church was literally packed with there were about 800 or 900 of us in those days. And it seemed to me to be part of this great family was tremendous.
You know, even in those Birmingham days of first meeting the Church Army, you felt that all the people you met at times, quite a lot of them, they were all a family. And they also they were bound not only by the work they were doing, but by a rule of life, which gave you a basis. And, you know, I've always felt that the rule of life is, and it's good to look at it at times and say, you know, how's it going with me, you know, because sometimes times are tough and so on. But I always think it's been basic to the Church Army that you've got a foundation there. And the family idea has always been very precious. And in the days when I was travelling around the country a lot and in a different church every weekend or visiting a different youth centre or forces centre, you were with other officers and you were welcomed into their family. You were part of something which was very precious. And I would be very sad if we ever felt that we lost that.
But I think we have to understand family also as being this continuity. You hand over, you share experiences, you share memories. This is part of family life, the ups and downs of family life in your journey along together. And it's easy to use the word family, but family requires work. It doesn't happen just because we say family. And I think sometimes we need to give a little bit more attention to what this should mean in the life of some society like the Church Army.
Well, I've done a lot of reading and looking at the life of Wilson Carlile and Mary Carlile, and what I have found out is that he was somebody who was always looking forward, and he wasn't someone who had, because he'd started something, felt that it had to stay in that particular place at the time. And he was so very much looking for change and progression. He didn't want to do things that other people were doing. He wanted to push forward and push all the boundaries forward.
Well, I would say about Wilson Carlile, there was the quality of authority. I think you realised that here was a special person. And there was this greatness about him. And if I may put it this way, there was a sanctified dedication. You knew here there was a good man. And his sister Mary Carlile had that same quality.
He was a very humble man, and he would come in. He was a man of God with no airs and graces. He was just a man who loved God to the full and prepared to just give everything. And he would just pop in if we're having a lecture. You never know when he was coming.
Well, I think he'd be very proud of those who were trying so hard to break through into communities, people perhaps who've never set a foot in church, know nothing about the love of God and the power of prayer. And I think he would be very proud of the people and what they're doing.
Wilson Carlile would want the Church Army to have the same aims today it had when he was alive, but he wouldn't expect them to use the same methods. He wouldn't want to see them still doing the same things. He would want a lot of progress. He would be right up front there with anything that was new, that was not just new for the sake of being new, but new in order to make the church real and valid to people today. He'd have looked for change, and he'd have expected it.
But I don't know what he would think to perhaps our latest idea of becoming an order. Because I think one of the wonderful things about Church Army is that they had to strive very hard in the early days for us to become an accredited, a part of the accredited ministry of the Church of England. And I think being part of the accredited ministry of the Church of England has been a real solid help in lots of ways.
He never lost the urgency of the church pursuing its mission of the gospel.
And I think he would still be saying, go out to where the people are.
Oh, yes.
I think Wilson Carlile was a very dynamic personality and also very up-to-date in that he was always looking to the future. He was never looking to the past, except where it was right to build on the past. But he was always looking to the future and saying, what is the need today, and how can we, through the Church Army, meet that need today?
I think today he would realise that the Church Army is as necessary as he felt it was at the end of the 19th century.
During my Church Army life, I've heard sometimes that the word army has been a bit difficult, particularly with those who have had troubles and wars and all sorts. And that's what goes through my head is this word army. We want to be with, we are an army, and when I had my sword given to me at commissioning, I always wore my sword up because I felt we were in a spiritual warfare. But if we lost the name, we haven't got to lose the vision, we haven't got to lose what Church Army started for.
The Church Army name, we have had so many discussions over the years about whether Church Army should remain being a Church Army, and a lot of people are against the idea of it being military. But on the other hand, if you translate it into the need for a constant fight against evil and things that are wrong, and a constant fighting for truth, then I think Army is quite a good name for it. It's a good name for it because when you start to think of what else it could be, you can't find anything that meets the case.
But when I went to Kenya, the African clergy in charge, they didn't accept me. Army, another army. They got the Mau Mau. They said their mind was different. They were thinking of bombs, but if we say the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, that's our weapon. But it's simple, but it's very hard for them to understand, I think.
You see, when you think of England now, the world is on our doorstep from all different countries. And if we get, which we are getting, army would be more difficult for so many to understand.
He would probably say, well, you look back on 127 years, however many it is, and you'll see how the Lord has blessed the Church Army through the years, how it's changed. But don't be afraid of change. And he would probably say something like, you know, go forward in faith in the real way, and you'll see miracles. And, you know, and again, be ready for the challenge.